Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Lynn Boland. I'm Director and Chief Curator of the Gregory Alucar Museum of Art at CSU. Welcome and thank you for being here. Before I introduce tonight's lecture, I want to let everyone know that we have interpretation services, so the lecture will be presented simultaneously in English by Kim and in Spanish through our interpretation service. So I'm going to invite Itzel up to explain briefly how that works and get anybody who needs it connected with that.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Itzel, and I'll be interpreting simultaneously from Spanish to English, English to Spanish. So I'll just make some quick announcements in Spanish, just in case anyone does need the interpretation. Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Itzel, y estoy aquí para proveer los servicios de interpretación simultánea. Estoy aquí para que todos puedan participar y escuchar en el idioma de su corazón. Así que, por favor, si necesita los servicios, encuéntrenme en la parte de atrás de la habitación. Voy a estar ahí con aparatos suficientes para cualquiera que lo necesite. Así que, por favor, si necesita los servicios de interpretación simultánea del inglés al español, por favor, encuéntrenme en la parte de atrás. All right, so just a reminder that I'm here because the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice, and so we want to ensure that everyone is able to listen and be heard in the language of their hearts. So thank you so much for helping us out to create this safe space for everyone to be able to participate in the language that they're most comfortable in. And if you at any moment see me kind of whispering in the back, I'm not talking, I'm just interpreting, just so everyone knows, and let me know if it bothers you. I am more than happy to move. But yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
I'd like to first acknowledge with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Hanana'e, Tzitzis, and Nooch, the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. And it was also the site of trade and gathering for numerous other tribes. We recognize the indigenous people as the original stewards of this land and all within it. I'm delighted to be able to introduce this evening's speaker, Kim Abeles, and her talk, presented in conjunction with the exhibition on view downstairs in the museum, Kim Abeles' Community Smog. It's an exhibition that does so many of the things that are at the core of what GAMA pursues. Art that gives insight into the most pressing societal challenges of our time, that gives access to complex ideas and gives entry into sometimes difficult conversations, all while involving and giving voice to as much of our community as possible. It's an exhibition that includes the single most immediately relevant artwork that I've ever known, a degree of relevance, in fact, that I would never hope for. An artwork made from the smoke and ash of the Eaton fire, hung on our walls while the fire still burned. GAMA is extraordinarily fortunate to be a part of this important project. And it's part of a larger project, Air Quality Through the Arts, which was designed to educate the public about particulate pollution and its effects. The project has been rich with community involvement, and many of the smog collectors in the exhibition downstairs were created by Fort Collins 7th graders at Lincoln and Lesher Middle School, by adults at Petrichor Collective, resident families at a manufactured home park in the Boulder area, members of the Air Quality Monitoring Advisory Committee, the Larimer County Health Department, and many others. The initial project was made possible by a grant from the Environmental Protection Agency, along with funding from Colorado Creative Industries, Arts and Society, and EcoArts Connections. The museum exhibition has been further supported by the City of Fort Collins FUNd and Cross-Sector Impact Grant, the FUNd Endowment at CSU, and by the Lilla B Memorial Endowment, which works to enhance cultural development and the arts at Colorado State University. Air Quality Through the Arts is organized by CSU's Center for Environmental Justice and the Department of Atmospheric Science, with additional partners in the Poudre School District, Petrichor Collective, and others, all of whom have been amazing partners for the exhibition as well, and I offer my profound thanks to all of them. A very special shout out, especially to Mindy Hill, to Emily Fisher at CSU, along with their teams, and to PSD art teachers Alice Champagne and Julie Hansen. Kim Abeles, Professor Emerita at Cal State Northridge, is an artist whose work explores biography, geography, feminism, and the environment. She has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, J. Paul Getty Trust Fund, California Community Foundation, Pollock Krasner Foundation. Her work is in public collections, including MoCA, LACMA, California African American Museum, Berkeley Art Museum, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and others. Abeles' journals, artist books, and process documents are archived at the Center for Art and Environment at the Nevada Museum of Art. Projects funded by the National Endowment for the Arts have included a residency at the Institute of Forest Genetics and a collaborative project with a group of female prison inmates who fight wildfires. She has numerous public artworks, including Walk a Mile in My Shoes, based on the shoes of civil rights marchers and local activists, and Citizen Seeds, 6 sculptures along the Park to Playa Trail in LA County. Her accomplishments have been impressive. I'll add that Kim is also one of the kindest, most accommodating, and far and away one of the most dedicated artists I've ever had the pleasure to know. Every moment I've gotten to work with her has been a powerful reminder of all of the wonderful things about my job, with nary a reminder of the things that aren't so great. A couple quick announcements to wrap up the introduction. This Saturday, March 1st, we're hosting a family day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in conjunction with the exhibition and featuring hands-on art activities and science activities from our partners. The program is officially geared to ages 4 to 12, but really, it's going to be fun for all ages. So come make your own smog collector and please help us spread the word. I hope you'll all also join us downstairs after tonight's talk to see the exhibition and enjoy some food, drink, and conversation. With that, I give you Kim Abeles.
Oh, thanks, Lynn. I got a little choked up there. Lynn thanked some of the people I also wanted to do a little shout out about because, and I just generally want to thank Lynn Boland because those of you that have already seen the exhibition, I think you know it's a very ambitious, energetic. There's a lot of work, there are installations, and we did have a great time doing it. Definitely, I like the idea of really thinking through, like, what is this exactly that I'm doing as an artist and with my relationship to community. I also wanted to thank again Emily Fisher, because Emily, you and your grad students at the Department of Atmospheric Science, that was like such a excellent contribution to all of it, to the workshops, to my personal way of thinking, to the way I will think forward. So I do appreciate that a lot. And Mindy Hill, where are you? Mindy. So Mindy is at CSU Center for Environmental Justice, for those of you that don't know that. And Mindy has a great group of people that she works with and also help to keep this energy aflow with another guest that we have here, Marta Kern. Marta, if you'd raise your hand, from EcoArts Connection at Boulder. And Boulder, many years ago, was the first community collaborative piece that I had done in your region, and really brought together Mindy and I, and then Lynn, and it was just like a ripple effect, which is like a lot of this work is certainly. So let me start here. Okay, the environment that is us. I said to Lynn, I'm not sure that's a proper phrase, but I think you get the drift of it, that a lot of times we think of the environment and the globe as and nature as something very separate from what we are. We're just like observers kind of hanging out for a while. But I really think it's important to keep that connection going about the way we interact with our world and the way the world interacts with us. I always need to start with this image of Pittsburgh. It's actually at 9:20 in the morning. And we had this photograph in our house when I was growing up in a book, and I would just stare at that photo because, as you may know, the steel industry was very vibrant in Pittsburgh, and as a result, there was also, well, with the cars and vehicles too, a lot of pollution. So these are the gas lights on in the early morning because the smog is just so heavy and thick in the air. So for undergrad school, I went to Ohio University, and that was quite different from growing up in Pittsburgh, but not so far geographically. And I lived in a grain silo that had been converted into a living space. And so, I know. And so, when I was 19 years old, and when I was 21, Van Nostrand Reinhold published this book that I made while I was living there called Crafts, Cookery, and Country Living. And I'm not going to give you the blow-by-blow of my whole career, but some of these early things that I did still carry with me in the way I think about art materials and sculpture, and just the way I think about the land itself. So this is right in the middle is where the silo is located in southeastern Ohio in Athens. And then I went from there to come to graduate school at UC Irvine in Los Angeles to this. And so my studio at the time in LA is actually also in the middle of this picture. So a lot of the work that I've done through the years, I like to build these contraptions, and in this case, this is an observatory that I built so that I could crawl in it every day and mark the path of the moon and the sun. And the sheaths that you see hanging from that are all the results. The moon is always cut out, and the sun is that bright yellow, and all the dates and times of days are listed on there. This is actually a picture of me in it, and I thought I'd show you another piece from this series. This vest actually has the daily newspaper that is listing the sun and the moon and the planets for that particular day. And I thought of this piece just this morning. I had my husband photograph it for you because it's this idea that this is an artwork that really surrounds me like a garment, and that the ideas, I could look them up in really a kid's book on the moon and the sun paths, right? But the idea that art could be a place where you would really live through these experiences, so you really felt them close up and within your skin. So this is a different type of piece. This is building another contraption that was facing the same spot of sky over 60 days. And so every day I would match the color of the sky that I would see in that little square. And all the results you see in the sort of paint samples and behind it have to do with the results. And again, like that first piece I showed you, everything's always documented with the date and the time of day so that you really have a sense of a little more information about this data gathering. In GAMA in the show, Lynn liked that piece so much, and I said, well, I don't own it anymore, and I actually built this one, and it says that same information with those sky patches, matching those sky colors each day. So I mentioned going, in downtown LA. On the left is my studio at the time on the 4th floor, and you'll see there's fire escapes out these. And this is actually where I looked north on Broadway that you see in the picture on the right. And one day I saw the San Gabriel Mountains, and they were so beautiful. And I hear from the laughter, you know why I didn't see them. And I had been there a couple years. I mean, and I, you know, like, look, I've been on, you know, I can look on a map. I know I must have been near them before. But that relationship between me being, you know, where I was and not being able to see them and then seeing it, it was sort of like when people see the Virgin Mary, okay? So you can see, I believe, wedged between those buildings in the back, right? You can see a little bit of what I ended up calling the mountain wedge. And so you see the contour of the mountain on the top, and then it's really framed by the street in those buildings. And what became real interesting to me was that suddenly I was also looking at what was happening in the street below or in the sky. Maybe there would be a blimp or something. And this particular one is when the Lakers won. And everybody's for the Lakers parade. So that started to give me this idea of this connection between, you know, you're kind of collecting this information about your environment, and also you're really opening your eyes to the other details that are happening simultaneously. So it took a year and 2 months to see the San Gabriels again clearly. And all the photographs that I took are mounted in this large walk-through bellows of a camera that I built. And you know, in the end, I felt like my memory of seeing it for the first time was much closer to what a painting would be like than the photograph I took on that second clear day. So as the viewer, you can walk through this bellows and see all those efforts, and again, it's all labeled and so on. And then that painting is actually a 10-foot tall painting that's at the end of it. So I got real attached to this mountain wedge, and I even to this day, when I see it when I'm in Los Angeles, I just feel like I have this personal connection to it. And I think people that go on hikes in certain places and so on, I think you can all relate to that idea that there are these spaces that we go to that become very personal, even if hundreds of people are also surrounding us and around there. So I decided on a first smog alert day, which in Los Angeles, they were always saying in the paper whether you should go outside or not. I'm talking, this is like early 80s. And so on a first smog alert day, pretty much everybody's supposed to stay inside, and I decided I would walk to the mountain wedge that day and see how far I would have to walk to see it clearly again. And I really had to be at the foot of it to see it. And I went as the crow flies, which means if I had to knock on people's doors to cut through their houses, I did. So, you know, it was a pretty hair-raising walk. I saw a lot of parts of what life is. You know, sometimes there maybe would be, because neighborhoods change, right, as you go through neighborhoods. And, you know, I remember this one that I thought, oh God, these people are never going to let me in. It was a very, you know, big, fancy house, and, you know, the person that entered the door clearly was the person that worked there. And as I looked behind him, there was a painting by my dear friend Arnold Meshies. So I yelled out, "Oh my God, that's Arnold's painting." And so they allowed me through. So I like these kind of situations where, I don't know, you just jump into the world and you just keep walking, you know, in that way. And when I got to the end, you know, sorry I'm very elongated on this story, but when I tell you I'm really there, you may not be, but I am. So I had made arrangements for people to different people, like I'll call you, this was before cell phones, I'll call you when I get there, because I'll need a ride back, right? And so I got there, and this lady runs out, and she says, "Oh, honey, you look like you need a Coca-Cola." And like, so I was pretty beat up. Like I had sat in a red anthill, and I had gone over barbed wire, and my glasses were a shamble. My hair was just full of whatever it was, and so I decided I'm not going to call anybody to take me home. This is like going to the prom and having your parents come. It's like, so I decided I'd take a bus, which really made more sense anyway. And so I went to the bus, and the bus driver said, "What happened to you?" And and I very briefly told him, and he said, "Well, you're not paying for the bus ride then, just get on the bus." So, it's kind of sweet how people are in these situations, like when you're really one-on-one with society. That's your best bet. That's a tip for you. So the first smog collector was actually that mountain wedge shape, and it was really just an experiment. I just did the one. I put it on the fire escape, kind of clamped it to there, and I really didn't make them again for a number of years. And so I thought I should tell you the process in case you're wondering how this actually works. These are put on rooftops or people's backyards or porches and so on, and I cut a stencil, and then I place it outdoors for different lengths of time, and then when they are brought in, I remove the stencil, and what is left is really the image from all that particulate matter. And that could be a lot of different things depending on where these are placed, all right? Now, part of the reason that I picked it up again, we had moved studios to a factory that was spewing out formaldehyde. And we tried as artists for the longest time to get somebody to do something about this. And, the process is always so slow. And I thought, you know what? This is where I can find a voice. And so I just started lining my roof at that location with all kinds of smog collectors. And a lot of them did have to do with health and human bodies and body parts and so on, since there's such a connection between our health and the polluted air in certain places. I've continued with a lot of that type of work. Digits in Smog was actually part of a show that was at COP15 in Copenhagen. This group that I sometimes work with, Recycles of Paradise Airport Making Waves, they do shows so that they're hoping that the different diplomats and leaders that attend these COP meetings will actually see artwork that relates to subjects. And in this particular one, the focus was gender, so the relationship between breast cancer and also with the air pollution. And so the digits in smog really, there were digits that represented the amount of breast cancer that was anticipated for the following year. And it's men also that have breast cancer. More and more I hear that added when people talk about breast cancer. So anyway, that to me is important, these kind of shows that are particular to going to events like that. Another one that happened in 2022, I had done a project in London with several people, and the idea was that in London they have these areas that are traffic-free, and they're typically in higher income areas, and the idea was to really expand some of those traffic-free areas to other locations. And that's when I met Rosamond. And Rosamond's daughter had died of asthma from her walk to school. And the thing that was so powerful about her telling me all this was that she insisted that the coroner say that the cause of death was air pollution. So you can sort of see that it's a more direct link for why this happened to her child, as opposed to just talking about it as the medical part of it. And she is very active politically and with groups to try to educate people, especially in the UK. So this lungs and smog that's actually in the exhibit, she put it in her yard for me to use and then to exhibit later. So a lot of the pieces and this one is also in the show. This has to do with health again, because this idea that we're ingesting this particulate matter, you've probably heard before, like when the smog is very heavy, perhaps, locally it's when the fires are kicking up. Kids shouldn't really be playing on the playgrounds and stuff like that, because they're really, they're running and their mouths are open and they're really ingesting it a lot. And it's particularly severe to, both young children and women because of the makeup of our body. And so this idea that, maybe you feel safe in your home is ironic, because people are much better about this now, but so many people were using different kind of cleaners and so on that were very highly dangerous and toxic throughout their home, but also the idea that, your window's open and this particulate or the toxins that you cannot see are actually coming into your home. So this is another view. Zoe's high chair is actually in the show, and her bassinet is actually owned by the city of LA and shows up in all the councilmen's offices, which is great. And in that one, it's car mufflers and for legs of it, and her toys and food are made out of smog. So I did a citywide project with the Bureau of Automotive Repair. And the idea was real particular to trying to get people to think about ride share, which is very commonplace now, but at the time, people that was just not something anybody wanted to do, to share a ride with your coworker, And so, anyway, we put smog collectors in various parts of the city so people could actually see the smog being collected, and I made an informational part that gave you tips about being sure to get emission testing for your car, and also, trying to pump up the idea of ride share and so on. So this project was actually an early time for me to see that this wasn't just an art form I had figured out how to make, that it really served as a communication and a way for people to talk about a subject which normally people don't want to discuss for many reasons. And so this idea that I would connect with kids of all ages and families and within universities and community groups has really sustained since the mid-'80s when I started, and has been a really important part of my practice, actually. And this one was actually done with Marta, who I introduced earlier at Manhattan Middle School, and this is an image of the kids' plates on the rooftop. And some of the venues that we did for this were not only at the school, where you kind of return the art to the people who made it and their friends, but also in the waiting room of the emissions testing facility in Boulder, where people are getting their smog checks done, and then here's this art and different angles of discussion about it. Part of the idea that came up when I work through again EcoArts Connection with the Natural History Museum at the university was this idea that lichen are used to measure pollutants. They're taken in the field and kept track of where they've come from and when, and then they're pulverized within the lab, and then they can actually do the chemical analysis of it and then compare through a long period of time. And I got so fascinated by this idea that these lichen, they're so ancient, and they're just watching what we're doing, you know. You think you're watching them, they're watching us. I think is what I learned from this. And again, that interchange between us and the world around us. Another thing that came up with that same project, the invisible connectedness of things, was a lichen hunt, so that we were trying to encourage people to go on this one bus route that was sort of poorly attended. And that, a piece like that, that sort of printed matter, really comes out of a long series of work that I have. I thought I'd show you an early example. This HIV/AIDS tarot that has in English and Spanish AIDS transmission and prevention advice and safer sex advice and so on. And this has actually gone through 3 different printings with updated information, since of course the info and the medicines and stuff are very different from when I first did this in the early 90s. So the work does have this political part to it. It's got a weird humor, but it also has politics. This is actually at the United Nations that occurred about 1.5 years ago. And I was, again, real thrilled by this unusual venue. And this is all the presidents from McKinley to Bush with their quotes about the environment and industry. And I left them out longer if their environmental records are bad. So that accounts for that grades of gray that you see on there. So for instance, you gotta love Jimmy Carter. He did more for us all along, even to the end, than really any president within their administration, right? I'm thinking of Habitat for Humanity and so on. And anyway, so I thought he and the Roosevelts gave it their best shot, you know, so they're out for 8 days while Ronald Reagan's out for 40, and then you can sort of see the gauge between, and these you can actually see them, and the quotes are pretty interesting, and I had a historian actually help me rate how this was going. You know, in other words, I could research the quotes, and people say all kinds of stuff, but what did they really do? So it was really merging of those 2 types of information. So not so long ago, I did World Leaders in Smog. This is Theresa May on the left in London, and how it really started was this wonderful museum in Moscow, the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art. They knew of my work and asked me if I would be in this show about that the politics of the future is really environmentalism. You know, it's really about that. And so I gave them a list of subjects. I had already told you all, you know, that I had done things on health and so on. So I gave them this list, and the bottom of the list I said, political leaders. And I thought, they're not going to do that. And that's the one they wanted, of course. And so they actually got me a good person to work with that we researched, and I said that I wanted to have the quotes be what they've said at COP meetings, you know, at the international meetings for the environment. And so that's what the quotes are. And these were put out in various places, but the part that I really ended up liking, because I had invested a lot of time in this, I found people in several of the capitals that were represented, and I sent them stenciled portraits of their leaders and asked them to put them out. And that's how Theresa May ended up on a rooftop in London, for instance. So, and then they mailed them back to me, and then, so the ones you'll see actually in the museum are a selection of 4 of them, the world leaders, and those were done in their capitals. That leads me to this thought that sometimes these pieces have this resonance. Lynn actually mentioned the Eaton fire that had happened very near where we live, and This one actually, right before COVID, I had put this large self-portrait catching the smog in my skirt out on some rooftops people lent me, and then the lockdown happened, and as a result, I had to bring them in because I had no idea when I would be able to access it again. So the smog that you will see in that piece is actually the particulate matter that came into my studio during that time period. There was also this idea that years ago I wanted to take Ansel Adams photographs, you know those about the beautiful American landscape, and I wanted to do smog translations of them. So I thought, well, I better write to the Ansel Adams Foundation and ask them, which don't do that. It's like, so they gave me a letter back, which is a kind of a priceless letter, I think, that says that not only could I not do it, but even his widow hated the idea. And so I still got stuck on this idea that you would take these images that wonderful photographers had taken of things mostly, well, in different places at this point, you know, these interpretations they had made. And the smog collectors, if you think about it, are similar to darkroom way that, you know, in a dark room, the light is falling, right? And that is how the image comes about on the paper and through the chemicals. And so the smog is kind of like that, this falling onto this image. So to me, there was always a relationship. So I got other museums to agree to do that with their collections. This is Margaret Burke White's smokestacks with the exact size, and they're always exhibited side by side. And I did others with that particular, that was the museum in Oberlin. And then Lynn helped me, you know, with the collection here, and this is the Van Beek landscape, and I had really swiftly made this smog, you know, the stencil for it, and I put it out, and like 2 days later, those Eaton fires were like 3 blocks from our house. And so it's really just so thick for such a short period of time with all that ash and smoke and particulate from that. So prior to that, in 2020, there had been a fire also near where we live, and it was during COVID, and so it was called the Bobcat Fire, and it was sort of like hell had rained, you know. It was like there's the COVID going on and all the lockdown and people's feelings and moods, and then here's this fire just, you know, hovering. You can sort of see the odd coloration of the sky there, and all I could think of was the Titanic sinking. And so I quickly grabbed these blocks of wood that somebody had given me, and I just had to do those lounge chairs on the Titanic and put them on there. There was a whole series of cave paintings that I had done the stencils for, and sort of another odd thing, when the Los Angeles uprising came and all those buildings were being burned in automobiles, all that smoke and ash was coming in the direction of where my studio was, because we weren't far from there. And so I thought it was this interesting, like, footprint, right, of humans from cave times, cave paintings, Lascaux, and then the kind of imprint that we do culturally and politically in our current status. This was the 4 Mile Fire at Boulder. I thought I'd show you the stenciled smog collector with the stencil removed on the right, and again, kind of coincidentally, placed outside when that fire hit. Now, I wanted to point out, and when you see the exhibit, if you haven't gone there already, do you see that third row in, how dark those look? Okay. I had done this workshop at Cal State San Marcos, And the students, we do a whole thing. We talk about the environment, of course, and imagery and, effects and causes and all this. And they put the smog collector stencils on the roof, and then their lockdown of their school happened for a year. And so nobody could access it. So these look like that because they were, locked on that roof during all of COVID, which to me is this other odd connection to it. And I guess part of it is too that everybody kept saying, oh, isn't this great how the air is, because of no cars out there. And I think there is some truth to that. And Emily, you may even have a particular thought on that one. But I also think there is this cumulative effect. And it's also, like in an area like San Marcos where there's a lot of farming and stuff, there are other things that come into the air. Automobiles and other vehicles are like the worst cause, but depending on where you are, as I said before, it could be emissions from factories that do fibers, and then of course with farming, and that could be pesticides and all kinds of stuff. Okay, so this thought that, this work that I do also has this teaching end. For me personally, I like that. Ever since I was a kid, to me, you could explain things more visually. So through the years, I've had these series of suitcases that I've made that, in this case, this dolphin suitcase, I welded it so that it's the shape of the dolphin. And my daughter and I went and we collected all this trash after a rain that ends up at the beach from the storm drain. And it's taken around to teach kids about that storm drain basin, that you're not supposed to throw stuff down there, even though it looks like a trash receptacle. And also, for me, what happens with these particular projects is that it all really becomes a consumer issue, like how much we consume and how much we can't stop and our choices in that way. A more recent set of suitcases, Lynn had mentioned this, I worked for 6 months with women incarcerated who are trained as firefighters. And so working with them closely, I was up there a lot, and they would give me the talking points for what we would be discussing, and also we'd be making parts. And I'll show you some of this because all these are fabricated from the ground up, and they're really intended to be functional. And for quite a while, I would take them to different events, and depending on the type of event, the talking points would differ. It was mostly about fire abatement, about firefighting, about these women in these conservation camps, and different things about our relationship that and what you should do around your home and so on. I gotta say, after these fires, like the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire, I have these very sober moments of dismay that, wondering what this work does, right? And so, I don't know, during COVID, we used to have these environmental groups with artists that do similar kinds of things, and one of the artists said at one point, well, think what it would be like if we weren't doing any of this. So I think there is a part of it that solutions aren't instantaneous. The word ripple effect came up earlier in this talk, this idea of each of us playing a role and each of us really being connected to our communities, the larger communities, the smaller communities, families and friends, and the importance of that. So LA County Arts and Culture owns these valises now, and so people can borrow one or all of them to use for events where they're really in discussion is the best way with the viewers and so on. What I would add on this, the German magazine or the German newspaper FAZ, just wrote an article on this project, and when Franca had interviewed me, I said, "Oh, you know, the bummer is that a lot of these women really do like the firefighting, like they're really sincere about their involvement, and they try very hard, and after they're released, because they're felons, they can't get the EMT emergency training." And she said that the governor changed that, actually, so that they can apply to be an official firefighter. So I was really relieved on that. I hadn't understood that yet. So when they're incarcerated, they're not paid much. I don't know, you may have heard $1 if they're not firefighting, $2 if it's a fire, you know, because they do abatement also through the time. So, but it's an open air prison. The food is really good. They have a lot of workout equipment because it is really strenuous work if you've ever seen any images of people really doing firefighting. So I'm very grateful to all these women that I got to really know in this experience. So there's 10 in all. I'll stop it here. You can always look online if you want to even hear discussion about it. This one is 1 month of my trash made into a hope chest. And the deal was I wanted to see how far I could reduce all this trash. You know, usually you throw something away and somebody else takes care of it, so you forget totally about it, right? And that was the thing I really wanted to come to terms with. Like, oh, you can cut paper, you can make this weaving. Oh man, what do you do with that Perrier bottle? What do you do with that coffee can? So I modified shredders and did all sorts of things to get things to their finest part. And what you end up with, if you throw your own trash away, is a bunch of food scraps. So that's when I started raising red wigglers. So when I perform with these, I give people red wigglers to start composting and try to just pump up the eye. You know, how many of you compost? I'm going to guess, yeah, see? Good. That's great. Okay. I mean, I get it that on some of these things, it's like, hey, Kim, didn't you get the memo? Everybody composts now? It's like, but for me, I really, like I did with that moon and sun piece, I really need to get physical with this stuff for me to be thinking about its implication and what it really means. So, you know, some of this stuff with the part about trash and consumption, this school, Harvard Westlake, sometimes schools have me come in and they don't really dictate what I should do, but they say, well, do you see a problem here we should solve? And so I hang out for a couple days, and then what I saw was they had a great recycling program, but nobody was using it. And so I thought and got permission from the principal that I would dumpster dive every morning and pull all their dumpster out, all their trash out, and take it home and iron it and wash it and stuff. And so then I, you know, re-exhibited it back to them. In the case of this one, this paper person is based on 1 day of their paper trash. And of course, some of the students saw their quizzes and stuff in there. And then I've done a few projects through the years with the California Science Center, and they loved that paper person. And they said, oh, we want one. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. Because it's a lot of dirty work, okay? And so one of the scientists said, oh, let's do Earth Day, which was just dynamite. And so on Earth Day I went, and there was so much trash. You know, at a science center, there are thousands of people that come in that day, especially Earth Day, I guess, right? And so I had to rent a public storage unit, And I would haul the trash to the storage unit not so far from the museum. And then over a long period of time, I'd pull out these bags of trash, you know, like a McDonald's hamburger. I tell you, it looks exactly the same 6 months later as it did the first day. So again, stuff was washed and ironed, and it's 45 feet by 48 feet, so you can get the scale of it. And I think, I'm looking at the time here, so I think I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna move a little bit. Let's see, this piece, the reason I want to show you this, we have 6 of these leaves in the show, and I felt like I wanted to show you the context. These are 36 leaves. They're all about, 4 feet long and stuff. And they're leaves from the oldest living trees in the world. And there are many more living trees, mind you, but I wanted geographically for it to really expand around the globe. And so as you can see from the legend, it's the name of the tree, the botanical name, the age of the tree, where it's located, and I bought the photographs of the skies that were taken at that location from different people that were photographing in those regions. So the sky is at the location of the tree itself. And so I thought I'd show you an image. There's 6 of them that we have, but it's along this building, and then that legend is also on the building itself. And I think that's it. Okay. So I don't know if you have any questions, and then I will be in the gallery itself. And always happy to take, but I wonder if there are any questions over some of the things I covered. Sure.
When the soot falls onto the plate, then do you have to fix it to the plate somehow?
That's a good question. One of the pieces that you'll see in there, the dining room with the car muffler legs, if we open that up, we could literally wipe that particulate off. So on the first ones that I did, including that first one I showed you from the mid-'80s, we did borrow that for an exhibition a while ago, and it looks just the same, but it wasn't fixed. And so through time, especially because the presidential plates, they're really cool if they're like somebody that saves plates and has them up in their dining room and stuff. What I use now is a thing called Spectrafix, which is a recipe that Degas used to use on his charcoal and pastel drawings. So it's all natural, it's not a spray. That question always brings up for me this idea that through, the environmental work was always of interest to me, and then as time went on, I was always trying to think of ways that were more sustainable, right? Like, why mess up the environment while I'm telling you some interesting facts, right? And I think that's really important. And it's hard sometimes, to figure out alternative ways. I guess that's why the trash work I like so much, because really I'm sewing it and so on in that way. Anybody else? Oh, 2 here. Oh. Yeah, are you talking like the world leaders or the presidential ones? Well, I use an X-Acto knife. I prefer to use like the official portraits when I'm doing portraits of people. So, I do drawing and then I just carefully do it. I don't know, is that a good enough answer? It's like just slowly, and then I make a mistake, and I got to do it again. What's that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, when I say draw, I have to draw on the stencil material. And if any of you, Saturday come to the event, the family day, I'll give you a special, understanding of it. And I don't know. You know what? You're making me think about the portraits. When I did those, the set of lungs in London, we did them in different areas, like even Greenpeace put one on their building and stuff. And then somebody wanted me to do Sadiq Khan, who, the mayor, and I was like, okay, he's a real advocate because he had asthma, and he's written a book about his experience with breathing and the environment and stuff. And then I'm jumping around a little, but I'm trying to make a point here. And then it was like, oh, you should do Greta Thunberg, right? And then it made me think, because I feel so bad about those Sadiq Khan portraits. It's like, it's not that, hey, I did Jimmy Carter, but it's in the context of an idea. And I think for me, despite the years of working in this particular way and so on, it really requires, kind of like I was telling you with the sustainable materials and stuff, like it really requires like constant soul searching on what is this? Because there's a wonderful writer, Harry Gamboa, who said, many years ago when I knew him, and we don't want to be decorating a time bomb. And I think there's an interesting thing about that we're really not trying to decorate issues, you know what I mean? And I think that artists, given the way I've seen the way the environmental movement with art has gone, I think some people tread pretty dangerously in that. So the value to me of this show and all the participants, the leaders, all of you that helped make this happen, and the kids that followed, and the artists, local and stuff like that, was that I kept picturing that there would be this big chorus of people saying, stop now, like do it, I don't know what they were yelling really. But you know what, this idea that collectively, when I started the Smog Collectors, they knew 97% of the solutions to clean the air. Now, I'm talking mid-'80s. And I guess when I think of those kind of things, I think we have everything we got that we need to do this, but it really takes interior will, I'm going to go with interior will rather than leadership, okay? Okay. Anyway, thanks. Okay. Oh, Marta? Sure.
So I just want to say, I've had the great pleasure of working with Kim since 2011 or 12. And every time I hear you, I learn new stuff.
Aw.
It's so extraordinary. It's so wonderful. And one of the things that I see, though, in this environmental, movement, in this wish, in this act, here we are in the middle of climate change. We have an interesting and difficult president I'm not going to go there, but one of the things that's so important, I think, with both science and art is the awareness that it can bring and the engagement that it can bring. And then we need the people, if you're having the head and the heart, we need the hands, the people that can actually change policy, the people that are in the city council, the people that can actually, anyway, so I'm just going to plea out to all you guys who are here to help in that, what Kim is talking about too, is that action part, to make that connection. And if you haven't already seen the exhibit, it's fabulous. And thank you to Lynn and to Lindy. It's amazing.
Well, thanks, everybody. And then if you haven't seen the show, I'll urge you to walk downstairs and check it out. Thank you.